Hi there, today we're going to be going over your first ever dimensioning drawing. This on the right hand side of the screen is called a spacer block, and this is going to be the chapter 9 number 7 drawing that we're going to use to demo how to actually get all these dimensions and get going with dimensioning on this program Autodesk Fusion 360. So the first thing you're going to need to do with any dimensioning drawing is actually draw the part out. After you draw the part, we're going to place it onto a title block, and then from that title block we're going to add dimensions to it, just like you see on the right hand side. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to model this actual part. So I need to start a sketch. That sketch needs to be started on one of these 3 planes. If you look up here on my view cube on the right hand side, I'm given a Z plane, an X plane, and a Y plane. If you look here, this plane would be my YX plane, so Y and X, and then the bottom plane will be the X and Z plane, and then this left hand plane will be the YZ plane. So that all corresponds with what view you're drawing. So if you're drawing the front view, you're going to be drawing the YX plane. If you're drawing the right view, you're going to be drawing the YZ plane. So mattering on what view you're going to draw first, you're going to choose the corresponding plane. So I'm going to start out by choosing this front plane, or front face, because I'm going to draw this front view first. So I'm going to click that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm using my mouse wheel to pan over, or to move my screen over, and I'm just going to roughly sketch what this is going to look like. So I'm going to start out by using my line tool up here. I'm just going to hit L on the keyboard to shortcut that. I'm going to start at my origin. I'm going to click to place down my line, and now I'll draw out to the right. So it's about somewhere around 5 inches, so I'm just going to guesstimate right now. This isn't placing any dimensions down, so I'm alright with that. I go up a certain amount, I come in a certain amount, I'll go straight up again, come over, go down, straight over again, come up, go over, and then go down, and then come over to the left and go down. So I'm going to hit escape to get off my line tool, but I just drew this pretty poorly to show you guys a couple of things we could do to fix a drawing after it's been drawn out. So this kind of looks like my figure I want, and now I have to start adding things called constraints to it that will actually start locking this in place. If you guys see all these little symbols around the drawing, what those are constraints that are already placed on these lines. That constraint says that this line has to be perpendicular. So if I click that perpendicular constraint, I could actually delete that constraint off of my lines, remove them, and that will unconstrain my sketch. So I could come over here to the right hand side, this is called my sketch palette, and I could re-add those perpendicular constraints. So I'm going to add those to my drawing. Now all of my lines are perpendicular right now. If they're not perpendicular, you could change that by using this perpendicular constraint. But I'm going to start using these constraints to make sure all my lines are the correct length and all that kind of stuff. So the first constraint I'm going to use is collinear. Collinear means that a line lays on the same plane as another line. So I'm going to use collinear, and I want this line to be the same height as this line. So I'm going to click both those lines, and it's going to move that down for me. Now I know I drew this line a little low also, so I'm going to click this line and my middle line to make them collinear, and then I'll make this line also collinear with this ending line. Once I have those, I could start using another constraint. So another constraint I could use is equals. Equals will allow me to put in less dimensions if I have multiple dimensions that are going to be the same, like this one's 1/2, this one's 1/2. I have a 1/2 height. I could start putting those in. So if I want this height to be equal with this height, I could set that. By clicking those two lines, I could set this height equal to this height by clicking those lines, but I'm getting an error. It's saying that the sketch is over constrained. The reason that is because I just set these two equal to each other, and because those are equal, and I have a collinear constraint already, then I know that these lines are going to be equal. So I'm setting myself up for it to be a lot easier. So now I'm going to set this line equal to this line coming out here because I know those will be equal. This line should be equal to this line. So any dimension that is equal to each other, we could set an equals constraint. What that's going to allow us to do is when we get into dimensioning, I only have to set one of them to a half, and then both of them will automatically update as I dimension them. So I'm going to hit escape to get off my equals constraint. Those are all the constraints I think I can add at this time. You can always go back and add more if you need to, or delete them if it's not working correctly. Now I'm going to start dimensioning. I could either hit D on my keyboard and that's going to automatically put me into the dimension command, or I could come down here under sketch and go down to sketch dimension. I think using the D is a lot quicker, so I'm just going to use that for now. I'm going to put in my first dimension. This is set to 1/2, this line on the left. You could either dimension point to point, or you could dimension by just clicking the line. Sometimes point to point is a little more accurate for you. So once you click both points, you have to place the dimension down by clicking, and then you'll get a text box on what you want the dimension to be. I'm given 1/2. I could either type in 1/2 or 0.5. I'm going to type in 0.5 and hit enter. And you can see that the whole drawing has now updated. So now I'm going to move to my next dimension, 1/2 at the top up here. So I'm going to hit D on my keyboard to get back in dimensioning. I'm going to go point to point, place my dimension down, and type in 0.5. And that automatically updated this one. So if I try to dimension this line now, you could already see it's 0.5. But when I place it down, it's automatically going to tell me that this will over constrain my sketch. Choose OK if you want a driven dimension. A driven dimension means it'll show a dimension there, but it won't do anything for us. So I'm going to hit cancel because we don't want to use driven dimensions ever. So now I could use dimension, and I could place it one on this line and place that to the correct dimension, which is 0.75. And now move those downwards. And now I need the total length of this point to the outside point. And that dimension is going to be, it's 1/2 from my pillar out to the center of my circle, and the radius of this outside circle is 0.75. So 0.5 plus 0.75 will give me my dimension. So for this I could do 0.5 plus 0.75. Hit enter, and that gives me 1.25. And you could see that that auto updated the other side. So now I could place a dimension down for 1.75 on this middle line. So I'm going to hit D on my keyboard, click that line, bring it up, and then type in 1.75. If you notice with my dimensions, I try to drag them out a little bit. Some of these are a little less out. Maybe move them out a little more, because what you don't want is you don't want a bunch of dimensions sitting on your actual drawing, because after you get all these dimensions in and we start playing around with our part, then these dimensions are gonna impede your view on what your part actually looks like. So make sure those are moved out from your drawing. And you can move them as far as you want. So I'm gonna dimension the bottom now, and that is already dimensioned to 5.25, which is exactly what I want it to be. So it's telling me that's a driven dimension because I already have a 1.25, 0.5, 1.75, and then this is dimensioned to 0.5, and then this is dimensioned to 1.25. So I don't need a bottom dimension on this. We're already done. Once you're all done dimensioning, you get off the dimension command, and a quick hotkey at this point is Q. Q in Fusion 360 is called the press pull function, and that'll allow us to either make an object from a 2D sketch to a 3D, or to fillet an object, or multiple commands. So I'm going to hit Q on my keyboard. It pulls up my press pull option, and then I could choose my feature, or my profile, which is going to be the object we just drew. And then it's going to ask me how far do I want to extrude it. So it puts me into an extrude command, which means take a 2D object and turn it into 3D. So I'm going to hit the home button, and it's going to bring me out to a 3D view. I'm going to use the mouse wheel to zoom out a little bit, and then it gives me an arrow. I could use this arrow to move back and forth and extend my object, but that's not going to make it exact. So I need to type in an exact dimension here. So if I look at my object, I'm given a radius of 0.75 for half of this circle. So I know that this entire circle should be 1.5 inches. So that gives me a measurement. I could choose which side it extrudes on. I could choose two sides. I could choose symmetric, or I could choose just one side and create a new body. Once you have your figure, there's pretty much two more things we need to do. We need to get the curves on the outside of the object, and also we need to get these holes going through the object. So I'm going to start out by getting the curves on the outside of the object. The easiest way to do this is fillet the sides. So you could either come into the Create menu and find fillet, which actually might be in the Modify menu. So fillet's right here. You could do that, or you could use that handy hotkey we talked about earlier. Hit Q for press pull, and you can use this to fillet the side. So we have a radius of 0.75 or 3/4. So I'm going to type in 0.75 as our radius. And now you just need to go around and hit all the corners. So I went back and I typed in 0.75 before I selected all my corners. So I'm going to have to hold Control on my keyboard and go back and select everything. So I'm going to select all four corners. Something you might notice in this program is I don't have to turn the object. It's showing me all the lines through the object, so I don't have to turn it. I could just select this corner from this view. So I'm going to select that and let go of Control, and it auto-updated to make that 0.75 radius. So now we're starting to look like our object. I'm going to hit OK on here, and now I got to place in my holes. So there's two ways to do this. We could use the hole function by hitting H on the keyboard or going into Create and Hole, or we could draw a sketch onto this face, use the circle function, and extrude that circle through to cut out the hole. So I'm going to show you both ways. So I'm going to start out by hitting H on my keyboard. It tells me to select a face or point. Always look at your menu up here when you're using a command. It's going to tell you exactly what's going on. So I'm going to select the face I want it on, which is this face right here. And then the next thing it allows me to select is a reference. So when you're doing a hole, you could either do a concentric reference, or you could do dimensions to a line. So you could see when I hover over this line, it shows up 0.77 as a dimension. So I could set a dimension, or if I select the arc of a circle as my reference, it'll automatically center that circle on the arc. And you can see it dimension that to 0.75, which is my radius. So now I need to set my diameter to 0.5. Mine's already set in here. I'm just going to retype it in, make sure. And then I need to set my extents to all. Make sure this is set to all and not distance. If it's set to distance, what can happen is it can be too short and not go all the way through the object. Or if you do use this to go through the object, let me get a different view here. If you do go through the object, then what's going to happen is if I want to go back and edit this object and I don't want that hole, or I do want that hole going through, it'll only go through 0.9. So make sure it goes through all. So if I do extend this object, it'll still go through the object. Tip angle doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we have a tip or not on this So I'm just going to hit OK. And that's going to give us that hole, and that's going to go through our object. Now I'm going to go to the other side, and on this side I'm going to show you the other way to do a hole. So we're going to create a sketch, and we're going to create it on this face. So I'm going to start on this face, and now I'm going to draw a circle. So I'm going to hit C on my keyboard for circle, or hit this drop down, go to circle, hit center diameter circle, and then I could hover over my outside arc, and I could come into the center point. It even says place center point. And now I'll type in my diameter of my circle, 0.5, and I'll hit enter on my keyboard. It locks it in as the dimension, and then I have to hit enter again for that circle to actually appear. Once it's appeared, now I could use my press pull option, which is by hitting Q on the keyboard. And it says select what you want to press pull. I want to press pull my circle. It puts us automatically into the extrude command, which takes a 2D object and makes it 3D. And now I could start extruding it through the object, and that's going to cut it out. It changes the operation from a join to a cut. If I moved it up, you see it's a join. It's creating an object. By moving it down, I'm cutting the object, and we don't want to do distance. We want to do all, because it's going all the way through the object, and hit OK. Now this is everything you need to do to get your model, and now we're going to go and do our drawing. Now we're going to take our object and we're going to place it in a drawing template, and then we're going to dimension it. So now that I have my model, I'm going to click this drop down for model, switch over to the drawing option of Fusion, and then choose from design, and that's going to be the design I have open right now. Now I don't have my design saved. I'm going to save this as dimensioning demo. Hit save. And now it comes up with my reference is the assembly I have right here. I want to create a new drawing. The template I want to use is my A size LT inches template, and hit OK. Now once I get to here, my scale is automatically set 1 to 4, and that seems kind of small for this drawing block. I want to always make sure that I fill up my entire drawing block as much as possible. So I'm going to change this to 1 to 1, and that should fill up our drawing block pretty big. Now I could place down my base view. That's the first view it wants me to place. I'm going to click just by placing it down, and then I'll hit enter on my keyboard to confirm that. Once that's placed down, I need to get projected views, my top and my right side view. So all I have to do is hit projected view up here, or hit P on the keyboard. It wants me to select a parent view. It's asking me on the right side of my mouse. I'll select my base view, or my front view. And now I'll just project up to the top, and I'll click to place that. And then I'll project to the right, and I'll click to place that. And then I'll hit enter on my keyboard to make sure those are placed down. Once I have those placed down, I'm going to enter my center marks. So center marks on my circles, and then center lines. So to place center lines in Fusion, all we need to do is click the 2 lines that the center line is in between. So I'm going to click this left line of the circle, then click this right line, and I'll place a center line for it. Left line, then right line, left line, then right line, and our center lines are all placed down. Now I'm going to start adding dimensions. The easiest way to add the dimensions, because it might exit off the dimension command every time you place one, is by hitting D on your keyboard and automatically going into the dimension command. So I'm going to start out by placing the dimensions on these circles up here. So I'm going to place a dimension, and I kind of want to make sure that I'm a little far from my view, but not too far that I can't tell what it's actually pointing to. Just enough where I'm not hovering over on top of it. You never want a dimension on top of your drawing. You want it outside of here. So there's kind of a box here that you want all your dimensions in. You don't want dimensions riding along the bottom near the title block or the left side of it. So I'm going to place these dimensions in. I have a 0.5 diameter, 0.75 radius, and it automatically annotated those dimensions for me with an R and a diameter sign, which is nice. So now I'm just going to go through the drawing and look at what dimensions it has and place those down. So I'm going to place down this 1/2. So I'm going from this point to this point, place down the 1/2. I'm going to go to the next dimension. That's from this center line to this side. That's 1/2. I have a dimension of 1/2 across this top. I have a dimension across this line, 1.75. I have a dimension across here that's 0.5. I have a dimension up and down, that's 0.75. And I have another dimension here that's 0.5. Then I have a 3 3/4 dimension. So I'm actually going to dimension that up here because there's a lot of dimensions on this view. So I'm going to go from point to point. I'm going to come down and place that dimension right there. I think that would be a better place. It'll make everything flow a lot more. But I do have a problem right now. I do have a dimension outside of my box. And I do have dimensions on my drawing that I need to move. So I'm going to hit escape, get off my dimension command, and I'm going to click this dimension over here. I just left clicked it once, and now I'm going to click and hold that 0.5 dimension sitting on there, and I'm just going to drag it over to the right side and click to place it down. Now that moved that out of there, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click once, and then I'm going to drag that dimension to the left side and then click once to place it down. Just like this one, I'm going to come over here, click that 0.5 dimension once, come to the top, and then place that down. Once I have all the dimensions that they give me on here, I know that my drawing is fully dimensioned, and now I can fill out my title block. In Fusion, it's a little different to fill out the title block. You're going to double click down here, and it's going to open up a title block menu. So I'm going to type in the current date, which today is 11/1/2017. My scale is 1:1, period, whatever period you are, 1 through 8. The BASI can stay the same. Your name in all caps, and then the assignment number should be dimension demo or dim demo, and hit OK. And that'll fill out your title block for you, and you're ready to turn it in.